I guess it would be fair to say, from a worldly or fair labor perspective, this parable today can be a bit hard to swallow. For those who worked the whole day under that oppressive sun, it didn't seem fair that the few who only worked maybe an hour received the same salary as them. They let the landowner know quite clearly that they thought this was unfair. Remember, they said these words, "These last have worked only 1 hour, and you have chosen to make them equal to us, who have borne the work of the day in the scorching heat." This decision by the landowner might surprise us or even cause us to question the fairness of his action. This is certainly true if we think that the parable is about just pay for just work. But that is not, I believe, what Jesus was trying to teach in this parable. He was not teaching a wage scale. Jesus was actually addressing a group of people called the Pharisees, who were dedicated to the exact dot in the law regarding the observance of the Mosaic law. They observed every single point in the Mosaic law. And they were openly hostile to Jesus because of his compassion towards sinners and tax collectors. They didn't need to be cared for, at least in the minds of the Pharisees. They get what they deserve. They don't follow the law. They objected to his willingness to forgive them and to welcome them into the kingdom of God as equals of themselves. Because, after all, they had rigorously kept the Mosaic law all their lives, not those other people. Worse, they objected to the opening of the kingdom to non-Jewish people who had never even heard of the Mosaic law or had never ever been told about the Mosaic law. So the Pharisees felt that they had earned God's love by their observance of the Mosaic law, and that it was unfair of God to allow others, such as sinners and Gentiles, who either ignored God's law or were ignorant of it, that they should share in the rewards. They acted as if God owed them something and should be indebted to them for their faithfulness and goodness. This was the attitude of the Pharisees, and this was to go on for a long time. And so Jesus in this parable is really addressing that question. So keeping that in mind, the parable too is really all about describing how God thinks. We heard in that first reading, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways." Our God is a God of freedom, a God of generosity, and a God of great love. God is free to call anyone at any time and anywhere to his mercy. God's generosity does not depend on what we do or do not do or where we're from. God is always offering his mercy. God is love and always manifesting that love through his compassion and welcome to all people. We might ask ourselves tonight, how might we apply this parable in the midst of the national debate regarding immigration policy? My intention, of course, is not to offer political speech. I'm not a politician, or endorse or reject any legislation. I only wish to apply a value in the gospel and apply it to the world in which we presently live. In this world where we live, there is great concern that our immigration system is in need of repair. From a faith perspective, if there is no God, then things are simple. This is our country. We are here, and those who are outside our borders are of no concern to us. But if we believe in God, especially if we believe in the God of this parable, then America is God's vineyard. We do not own this land, nor does this land. God does. We are not here because of any right we possess. We are here because God chose us to be here. We are the first to be hired. Now, have we worked hard? You bet we have. All of us are hard workers. Do we pay our taxes? Yes, we do. Maybe not willingly, but we do. Do we strive to make this country healthier and more secure? Without a doubt. But because we believe in God, we also know that God would tell us to say to those who are at our broken borders, those fleeing violence and wars, seeking a better life for their families, waiting to come into our vineyard and work, God would say, I believe, yes, you too, come into the vineyard. This does not mean we neglect the need to have secure borders and just laws. We need those. But as believers, our voice in the public debate should express the experience of our generous God. Deeply aware of God's choice to place us in this great country with all of its blessings, we should speak up for the God who chooses the last together with the first. Finding an appropriate way to welcome refugees and immigrants into our vineyard of the United States need not diminish us. In fact, history has proved since the founding of our country that welcoming immigrants and refugees can add to our work, the work of others, so that together we may obtain an even more abundant harvest. I remember being in El Salvador several years ago, and there was a young man named Selvi. And Selvi came from a rather large family. And his dad had the nickname Mapache. Mapache means raccoon. We asked him why his dad had that name, and he says, during the war, we had to escape and hide. And we lived into the woods, and the only food that we could eat was what my dad could catch, and that was raccoons. And Selvi was thinking of leaving the country. He couldn't finish his education because the schools didn't go any higher. He didn't have any work in the village. There was just nothing there except out into the fields. And he also knew that he couldn't go to the big city because he'd be called into gangs. And so he was thinking about going north and entering into the country. And I talked to him for a long time, and I said, Selvi, think this out. Think this out. It's not the promised land always. You're going to have to go through a lot of time to get there. You're going to get robbed. You're probably going to get beaten. You're going to be detained, and you'll probably be sent back several times. It's not the easiest thing to do. And he says, I would love to stay here, but I'm only a burden now. I can't do anything for my family. And so he took off, and we gave him a blessing. And everything I told him what would happen, happened. He was robbed. He was beaten. He got lost in the desert and turned himself into the Border Patrol in order to save himself from dying of thirst. And he was returned several different times. And my only thought after that of hearing that story was, I hope that someday those that are desperate, those that truly are in need of a place to find a decent, wonderful life, will find a place in our vineyard so that we can share our goodness with those who are certainly in most need.